The night he showed up at the hotel, I was carrying a tray of champagne flutes to the penthouse elevator and thinking about whether I had enough in my account to cover both rent and my sister's birthday dinner. That's the kind of thing you think about when you work the evening concierge shift at the Ashford. You're surrounded by wealth so extreme, it stops feeling real. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you're calculating whether you can afford to take the bus or if you need to walk home again. I'd been at the Ashford for 11 months. Long enough to know which guests tipped and which ones didn't. Long enough to know that the man in suite 1401, the one who had booked the entire 14th floor for the week, the one whose reservation was flagged with 3 asterisks in our system, which meant management handled everything personally, was not someone I was supposed to have any direct contact with. His name was in the system as Mr. Harlow. That's all I knew. That and the fact that he had standing orders for a specific brand of scotch. That his meals were delivered by our head chef personally, and that 2 men who looked like they'd been carved out of granite stood outside his door at all times. I hadn't spoken to him. I'd barely seen him. Once, coming out of the service elevator, I'd caught a glimpse of him at the end of the corridor. Tall, dark coat, the kind of stillness that makes a room feel smaller. He'd glanced in my direction for exactly 1 second before turning away. That was the extent of it. I should tell you about my ex-boyfriend first, because that's the part that matters. His name was Derek, and we'd been together for almost 3 years. I'd ended it 8 months before any of this happened, and for a while, I thought it was over the way these things are supposed to be over. Quietly, with some sadness, and then eventually not. Derek was the kind of person who seemed completely reasonable in the beginning. He was funny. He remembered small details. He showed up with the exact coffee order you mentioned once in passing, and you thought, this is what it feels like to be known. What I didn't understand until much later was that the remembering wasn't tenderness. It was inventory. By the end of our 2nd year together, I couldn't make a decision without explaining it. I couldn't have dinner with a friend without him calling twice before I got home. When I finally said the thing I'd been rehearsing for months, I need to end this, he sat very still for a long time and then said, "You'll change your mind." He said it like a fact. Not a threat. A fact. For 6 months I'd had a new phone number, a new address, and the kind of hypervigilance that you can't really describe to someone who hasn't lived it. You're always scanning. You learn which exits are fastest. You notice when someone's been parked on your street for too long. I thought I'd been careful enough. It was a Thursday in late October, the kind of evening where the light drains out of the sky early, and the wind off the lake has real teeth. I was at the front desk covering for one of my colleagues, who'd gone on break and wasn't back yet. The lobby of the Ashford is all dark, marble and warm lighting, the kind of place that makes everyone who walks through the door feel like they've just arrived somewhere important. I saw Derek before he saw me. He was coming through the revolving door with the particular expression he always had when he'd made a decision. Calm, almost pleasant, like he'd already run through every possible outcome and settled on the one he wanted. My body understood what was happening before my brain caught up. I felt my hands go cold. I set down the pen I was holding very carefully because I was afraid of dropping it and making a sound. He saw me the moment I hoped he wouldn't. The smile that crossed his face then was the thing I'd been afraid of for 8 months. It was the smile of someone who'd been looking for something and found it. "There you are," he said. Just that. Like I was a set of keys he'd misplaced. I stepped back from the desk. "You need to leave. I just want to talk." He was already moving around the side of the counter, the way he always moved through space, like he was entitled to it. "You haven't returned any of my messages. Because I don't want contact with you. That's clear. I've made that clear. You've been dramatic," he said, and there it was. The old reframe, the thing he did where my reality became a performance I was putting on. "I'm going to call security," I said. He laughed, soft and almost fond. "Come on." He reached for my arm. His hand closed around my wrist, and I heard myself make a sound I didn't intend to. Something between a breath and the beginning of a word, and in the same moment I became aware that the lobby had gone very quiet. Not empty. Quiet. I don't know exactly how to explain what happened next, because it happened in a way that didn't feel like a sequence of events. It felt simultaneous. The elevator doors at the far end of the lobby opened. Mr. Harlow walked out. He wasn't rushing. He was walking the way he always seemed to move, unhurried, with the specific gravity of someone who has never once needed to announce himself. One of the granite men was at his left. Another I hadn't seen before was already crossing the lobby floor. Derek's hand was still on my wrist. Mr. Harlow looked at Derek's hand. Then he looked at Derek's face. Just for a moment so brief that if I hadn't been watching closely, I would have missed it. Then he looked at me. I don't know what he saw. Whatever it was, something in his expression shifted. Not dramatically, not in a way you'd catch on camera, but it shifted. He said something to the man beside him, low, barely audible. The man nodded once. Derek became aware of them approximately 2 seconds later. The change in him was immediate. The pleasant expression didn't disappear exactly. It recalibrated. He released my wrist. "I think," Mr. Harlow said from somewhere around 10 feet away, not raising his voice at all, "that the lady asked you to leave." He hadn't spoken to me. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at Derek with the particular attention of someone who is deciding something. Derek opened his mouth, closed it. "There's a car outside," Mr. Harlow continued, still calm, still unhurried. "I'd use it. I don't know how Derek left. I know he left." I was looking at the marble floor, trying to breathe in a way that looked like regular breathing, gripping the edge of the counter with both hands. When I looked up, the lobby was normal again. Guests. A pianist starting the evening set in the bar to the left. Mr. Harlow was still there. He was looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not pity. Not the uncomfortable distance people put between themselves and a scene they've just witnessed. Something more direct than either of those things. "Are you all right?" he asked. I almost said yes automatically, the way you do. Then I didn't. "I'll be fine," I said instead. "I'm sorry you had to." "Don't apologize," he said, and something in the way he said it made me stop. He left after that. Back to the elevator, back to the 14th floor, back to whatever world existed up there that had nothing to do with mine. I stood at the front desk for another 4 hours and did my job perfectly and thought about almost nothing else. I expected that to be it. I thought, he's a guest, I'm staff. That was an extraordinary moment, and it will recede into background noise the way extraordinary moments do when the people involved have no reason to speak again. The next morning, there was a note at the concierge desk. Folded. My name. Just Ren, my first name, which I'd given when he asked if I was all right. Written on the outside in handwriting that was economical and precise. "If you need anything handled regarding last night's visitor, I can arrange it." H. I stood there holding it for a while. Handled was a word that could mean a lot of things. I wrote back on hotel stationery, folded it, and asked the morning's supervisor to see that it reached Suite 1401. "Thank you. I've filed a report with security. I think it's taken care of." His response came back within the hour. "Good, but let me know if it isn't." I put that note in my jacket pocket and kept it there, without thinking too hard about why. Over the following week, something shifted in the way Mr. Harlow occupied the hotel. Not dramatically. He didn't seek me out. He didn't appear at my desk or manufacture reasons to walk through the lobby. But I became aware of a kind of attention that I didn't have language for at the time. Small things. The route his detail took through the lobby in the evenings seemed to thread past the front desk more consistently than before. Once, when a guest became agitated with me, over a reservation issue. Raising his voice, leaning over the counter in that particular way that some men do when they've decided that louder is persuasive. I saw one of the granite men appear at the edge of the lobby within 30 seconds. He didn't intervene. He just stood there, visible, and the guest's voice came down by half. After the guest left, the man returned to wherever he'd come from. We didn't acknowledge each other. I told myself I was imagining a pattern. I was not imagining a pattern. On my Friday evening shift, there was a delay with the 14th floor meal delivery, and the head chef asked me to run it up. "Just this once," he said. "The usual staff were tied up with a private event." I said yes, because that's what you say. I knocked. The door was opened by one of the men I recognized. "Concierge delivery," I said. He stepped back and gestured me in. The suite was the kind of space that makes you recalibrate your sense of scale. Floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread out below with the lake beyond it going dark under an overcast sky. The lamps were on. Papers were spread across a long table. Not left carelessly, but arranged with a specific order, the kind of organized that means someone is in the middle of actual work. Mr. Harlow was standing at the window. He turned when I came in. He was wearing a gray sweater rather than a jacket for the first time, which made him look not different exactly, but like a different layer of the same person. "Thank you," he said. "Of course." I set the tray on the designated table and turned to go. "Ren." I stopped. He wasn't looking at the tray or the window. He was looking at me with that same direct, undecorated attention. "The man from the lobby," he said. "He's been outside the hotel twice this week. I felt the floor do something underneath me, metaphorically." "How do you?" I started. "My people pay attention," he said simply. I stood there. Outside the window, the city lights were beginning to come up against the dark. I thought about Derek's face when he'd said, "There you are," the particular ownership in it. "He's not going to stop," I said, not to Mr. Harlow specifically. More to myself, out loud, for the first time. "No," he said, "he isn't." Something about the absence of false reassurance was unexpectedly steadying. "There are things that can be done," he said, "if you want." I should have been more unsettled by the open-endedness of that sentence. Coming from anyone else, I would have been. Coming from him? From someone who had watched Derek walk out of that lobby with the specific, practiced efficiency of a man who understood consequences. It landed differently. "I'm not asking you to do anything illegal," I said. "I'm not suggesting anything illegal," he said. And there was something in it that wasn't quite amusement, but was adjacent to it. "I have lawyers. And a restraining order has more teeth when the person filing it has support." I hadn't thought about it that way. That a piece of paper could mean something different depending on who was standing behind it. We talked for 40 minutes that evening. Longer than I should have stayed. Longer than made any professional sense. He asked about the timeline. When Derek had started showing up, how he'd found the hotel, whether I'd documented anything. He listened in the way that some people are constitutionally incapable of. Completely, without preparing his next sentence. When I finally said I needed to get back, he nodded. "The offer stands," he said. "Whatever form is useful." I said goodnight. In the elevator going down, I realized my hands had unclenched for the first time, and I couldn't remember how long. The next 2 weeks moved in a way I hadn't expected. A lawyer called me. She said she was representing Mr. Harlow's interests in a professional capacity, and that she'd been asked to assist me with a civil matter if I consented to it. She was crisp and precise and had clearly done this kind of thing before. Within 4 days, I had a restraining order filed, documented, and served, with her office as the contact address rather than my home address, which meant Derek couldn't use the legal paperwork the way restraining orders can sometimes be misused, as a map to where you live. I didn't see Mr. Harlow during those 2 weeks except in passing, a nod in the lobby. Once, his detail moving through as I was finishing a shift, and him pausing just briefly enough to ask, "Is it proceeding?" I said yes. He said good. He kept walking. I told myself that was the appropriate shape of things. He was a guest. He'd been decent. It was over now. Then on a Tuesday evening, the kind of evening where the sleet comes sideways off the lake, and everyone in the city is privately agreeing that they should have moved somewhere warmer. I was finishing my closing checklist when I heard my name. He was standing near the bar entrance, alone for once, at least. No visible detail, though I'd learned by then that alone was a relative term with him. "I'm leaving on Thursday," he said. Something moved in my chest that I didn't examine too closely. "I hope the stay was satisfactory," I said, in my concierge voice. The corner of his mouth did something. It was. He looked at me for a moment. I wanted to say, "You handled everything with more composure than most people would have." "I didn't feel composed," I said. "That's usually what composure actually is," he said. I thought about that for a second. "Thank you. For everything. The lawyer, the all of it." He waved it off in a way that managed not to be dismissive. More like, "The accounting of it is unnecessary. I'll be back in the city in March," he said. "If you're still here." It was phrased so carefully. Not a proposition, not a promise. Just an opening left open, with nothing required of me. "I expect I will be," I said. He nodded once, like that settled something. "Good night, Ren," he said. "Good night," I said. And then he was gone. and the lobby was just a lobby again, and the sleet was still coming sideways off the lake, and I stood there for a moment before finishing my checklist. March came the way Canadian springs do. Reluctantly, the cold hanging on past its welcome, the city still gray and gritty, while everyone insisted there was warmth coming. He arrived on a Wednesday. I was at the desk. When the reservation came up in the system, the previous week, I'd been aware of a feeling I couldn't quite categorize and didn't try to. I just noted the date and kept working. When he walked through the lobby Wednesday afternoon, he looked the same. The dark coat, the unhurried movement, the quality of attention he brought to whatever was in front of him. He glanced at the desk and found me there, and something in the deliberateness of that glance told me he'd expected to. "Ms. Ashford," he said, which was the hotel name, not my name, and somehow contained a quiet joke. "Mr. Harlow," I said. "Welcome back." He checked in. He went upstairs. That evening, a note arrived at the desk. "Dinner tomorrow if you're free. Not as hotel staff, as yourself. H." I looked at it for a long time. I thought about the 8 months of scanning rooms for exits. I thought about what it had taken to trust my own assessment of a room again, of a person, after Derek had spent 3 years teaching me that my assessments were wrong. I thought about the elevator going down from the 14th floor, and my hands unclenching. Then I wrote back, "I'm free at 7. His name was Harlow, but his first name, I learned over dinner in a quiet restaurant in Yorkville where the staff knew him and left us alone, was Callum. No, that was the file. His name was something else. Something I'd remember for a long time afterward, the first time I used it. His name was Edmund. No. I'm going to tell you the truth. I was nervous at that dinner. Genuinely nervous. In the way you are when something feels real, rather than managed. He was, in the controlled environment of the hotel, a person of significant intimidation. Out of it, in a restaurant, in a gray sweater again, ordering the kind of meal that suggested he actually thought about food, rather than just consuming it. He was still that, but also someone who asked follow-up questions and remembered the answers, and sometimes went quiet for a moment before speaking, like the words mattered. We talked about the city, about the particular way Toronto winters make people unexpectedly honest with each other, like the cold strips away certain performances. He told me about a city on the east coast of Scotland he'd spent 3 years in during his 20s and still thought about when it rained. I told him about growing up 3 hours north of the city, about the specific silence of rural Ontario winters, about the way I'd come to Toronto at 22, thinking I was going to make a specific kind of life and had made a completely different one instead and hadn't decided yet whether to be disappointed about it. He listened. He actually listened. At one point, he said, "You could have left hospitality. You're clearly capable of other things." "I'm good at it," I said. "You're excellent at it," he said. "That's not the same question." I didn't have an answer to that. Or rather, I had an answer that I hadn't articulated to anyone yet, including myself. That I'd stayed because the hotel felt like a place where I had control, where I knew the variables. After Derek, controllable environments had become the thing I sought without naming. I didn't say all of that at dinner, but I said some of it. Enough. When we walked out, it was properly cold. The first clear night in a week, the city sharp-edged under a sky that had given up being overcast. He had a car waiting. He asked if I needed a ride. "I take the subway," I said. "I know," he said. "I'm asking if you'd like not to, tonight." I thought about the specific stubbornness that had gotten me through the past 8 months, the way I'd refused to reroute my whole life around what Derek had done. Then I thought, this is different. This is a choice made towards something, not away from something. "All right," I said. In the car, his car, quietly expensive, a driver who was clearly also the kind of person who appeared in lobbies when voices were raised. He didn't try to fill the silence. We watched the city go by. The lake appeared briefly between buildings, flat and very black under the clear sky. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Yes, that night in the lobby. You weren't there by accident. You'd have seen the cameras." He was quiet for a moment. "My people monitor the lobby. Standard practice. So you knew what was happening before you came down." "Yes, you didn't send someone else." He turned to look at me. In the low light of the car, his expression was, for once, uncomplicated. "No," he said. "I didn't. I let that sit for a moment. Why? He looked back out the window. The lake was gone now, streets again. Because